one of the other special features that I'll be testing with this new Nikon D3 is how dark a subject I can shoot. For example, generally speaking, since the sun angle is so important for getting a good contrast in a shot, so you can kind of see the shadows on the bright side and the dim side of mountain range to get a sense of depth in those pictures. This particular camera is very sensitive to low light, and so since it might be one of the, at least as a handheld camera, is one of the most sensitive digital cameras that will be taken up so far. And so I'm hoping that I might be able to even take some pictures of the Earth at night to show what all the lights on in some cities look like. And I don't know if any of you go out at night in a big city and try to look up and see the sky, but at least where I live in Austin, Texas, 20 years ago, where my house is outside of the city, I had fairly dark skies and could see the stars and could see the Milky Way when I would go out at night. But 20 years later, through the observatory that I have on top of my own house, if I open up the observatory or walk out in the lawn and look up into the sky, the light pollution has really caused quite a bit of disturbance to what you can see. But hopefully, with this new camera, I might be able to see what the nighttime lights look like from space. And before I pass the microphone back to Rita, I have one more picture here to show and another person to introduce here in my room. First, I'll show you a picture. Here is a very recent photograph of the Earth and of the International Space Station from space. And this particular photograph was actually taken by my good friend Soyeon Yi, who, if she'll sit down here beside me, she has actually just returned from space and now has some very fresh experience, you might say, in trying to take pictures of the Earth from space. And she took this image that I just showed you, and who knows, maybe she can make a comment about how easy or difficult it was to take pictures from space. And you can speak to this microphone, but you won't hear anything because we're not getting feedback.
Hi, nice to meet you. And then I just take the photo in my cabin, and then I think it's really, really beautiful. At the time I didn't know that, but after I get back here, I realized that it's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. And how hard did you find it to? Did you actually take pictures of directly down at the ground also?
Yep. But it's a little more harder.
More difficult.
Yeah, more difficult.
And did you use the same 250mm lens that I'll probably use, or do you remember?
Yeah, right. But at the time, in the middle of the window, you feel that ISS flies so fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and during the preparation, we can miss whole things.
Oh, just while you're preparing.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, also reflects on the software that I know Dan has been trying to talk about here on the broadcast, which is the Windows, the WinEarth software that's in the PowerPoint presentation. That is a piece of software that I'll be running on a laptop sitting right beside that window, which will hopefully help me with the problem you've just described, where Soyeon was mentioning that even while preparing for the photograph, the ground target moves past.
You're right. And then even though I prepare first and then waiting for my place, but somebody said to me, please make a way to fly, and then all I missed it.
And then it's gone. So even just not paying attention for a brief moment, the opportunity will pass very quickly. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, there's at least a brief introduction. Why don't we pass it back to you, Rita, and see if you have other questions or how you want us to proceed.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really exciting to have a special guest with us today. And we do have one question for you. How did it feel when you went from the dark side of the Earth to the lighted side of the Earth?
Yeah, so the question to you, Soyeon, is how did it feel to transition from the light side of the Earth to the dark side of the Earth?
Dark side transition. And then almost transition time we cannot recognize because all the windows are closed.
Oh, yeah. So if you didn't hear that, she said The transition from dark to light you generally don't notice because all the windows are closed. In fact, the big windows are facing the ground. So you must have sat by the window and watched the transition.
Yeah, right. Some windows are open, so we can feel that. But most of the time we just concentrate on other works, so we just ignore the dark and bright. But if you see the window for 1 hour, 2 hours, you can recognize that, but it's not that easy.
And but how did it? So, but you must have watched, just as a passenger, you must have watched the sunset and the sunrise.
You're right.
So, was that an impressive thing to observe?
Yeah, it's really impressive. Most beautiful time is the transition, actually. Not the daytime and
Such
nighttime.
as in your photograph.
You're right. Daytime and nighttime also beautiful, but transition time is more beautiful, I think.
Yeah. Any more questions from you, Rita?
Yeah, we have another question from our guests today, and the question is, can you become an astronaut these days if you don't speak more than one language?
Well, prior to my training here, I was not bilingual, and English was truly my only language. But now I'm taking 4 hours a day of Russian in an attempt to learn enough Russian for flight. And as some of you may suspect, all of the controls and things on board the Soyuz are written in Russian, in fact usually Russian acronyms, so it's even more difficult than just straight the Russian language. However, and in addition to that, when you launch and when you re-enter, the mission control here in Russia offers all of its commands in Russian. But Soyeon here actually has now done 3 languages. So she actually, of course, her native language is Korean. She already knew how to speak English, but she had to learn Russian for the same purposes as I have to learn Russian. However, I think she and Kosan had an additional problem, which was that most of the classes that are taught here are taught either in Russian, which she didn't know at the time of arrival, or they do have translators and teach some things in English. So she had 2 languages that they didn't use. So you had to always use one of her new languages, so to speak. Any comments about that?
And actually for us, English and Russian, all the foreign language, so always confusing. And in my brain, and they are mixed around, and then sometimes I confuse them, which is Russian and which is English.
Yeah, so at least, I don't know about the rest of you, but as an American, I feel somewhat guilty about how few alternate languages most of us speak. Fortunately for us, most of the cosmonauts also speak English, so once you're on board the ISS, English is a very common language to be used. I think it's very important for being productive, as well as for safety, to learn a significant, at least a fair bit of Russian, wouldn't you say?
You're right. It's very important. And sometimes I think translator is really good in English, but sometimes I feel that we'd better study about Russian to feel more deeply and then to communicate with the Russian cosmonaut deeply. And then they are good at in English, but if we can speak Russian and we can be more close and we can be more understand more than that, so I think it's necessary.
Yeah.